Even the smallest person can change the course of the future. J.R.R. Tolkien, The Fellowship of the Ring. Welcome to the Wandering Tangent Podcast. I'm BJ, with me is Jeff and Gary, and today we're going to talk about the 1988 fantasy movie, Willow.
Yay! This has been a cursed production, hasn't it, guys?
Are you talking about this particular recording, or just...
He's talking about everything we've ever done.
Or just Willow in general, as far as it applies to this podcast?
I mean, isn't it... So didn't you guys... I remember you guys telling me the story that this one was cursed originally, and then now that we're trying to do it again, it's also being cursed, right?
Yeah, so it was my turn to choose a movie, and we're closing in on some milestones. I don't know if this is going to be quite the 1-year anniversary of Gary joining the podcast, but it's going to be pretty close, and we're closing in on the general 2-year anniversary of the podcast, so I figured it was time for us to once again tackle Willow, because this is the movie that killed the first iteration of the podcast, which has not been seen by viewers.
Yeah, by killed, we mean that BJ and I had no experience with recording and talking about things, and we ended up with a 3-hour giant discussion.
Yeah,
that was just a monster of details. And after all that, we were exhausted, and we realized that you can talk about anything endlessly, forever and ever and ever. So eventually you have to figure out when you want to stop, and that is a skill of itself.
Yeah, this movie is the reason why I keep trying to stop us by going scene by movies, because we did this on Willow, and it killed the podcast for a year.
We were like, we can't do this.
I'm not
3-hour recording.
That's what you're talking about.
It's going to take forever to edit the audio. Oh, it's work. We can't do it. It's work. Yeah. But anyway.
And then, and then this one in particular, I think there was some reason why we wanted to record last week and we couldn't. I can't remember what it was.
Well, we like to operate with a little bit of a buffer, and we had already used our week buffer to postpone something else. So there's the idea of reestablishing the buffer with this podcast, but then
kind of fell through.
We did other things last week as friends.
That's all the madness behind the curtain stuff.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, it's a little chaotic to.
And then last weekend, we got
schedules.
Last weekend we got Eaten by Vampires and Eaten by Vampire and by Cthulhu, so we couldn't record.
Yeah, that was
excuses.
Difficult.
There's going to be one person who listens to this podcast that gets that reference. She's going to be, I don't know if she's going to be happy because we lost twice that weekend, but she'll get the reference.
I mean, she was there with us. She could have helped, and, well, she did.
That's why she'll get the reference.
Anyways.
Anyway, yeah, so...
So, Willow.
Willow, yeah. I was going to say, who wants to...
Okay,
who wants to say
non-spoiler... Yeah, who wants to say their thoughts?
I mean,
who has thoughts?
I mean, what do you say about a classic? There's a reason why this movie, not anything else associated with it, just the movie, is a classic movie, right?
Well, to be fair, if you're talking about a certain series that was on Disney Plus, that doesn't really exist anymore, so no one really knows what you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't even think Disney knows what you're talking about at this point. They'd like to, they kind of quietly swept it under the rug.
Jeff, do you not know what we're talking about?
I don't know what you're talking about. I know that there was a Willow series that came out, and I watched a little bit of it.
There was a Willow series that came out.
Okay, on streaming, on Disney Plus.
On Disney Plus. Yep. Depending on who you ask, some people say it did very good. Some people said it did terribly, but as a, quote, cost-saving measure, unquote, it is now no longer on Disney Plus. You can no longer view the streaming the Willow TV series.
And,
and
in all honesty,
as of right now,
I think that speaks volumes.
Okay, I don't get it. So they removed it because people didn't like it, or did they remove it because something about it made people upset?
Their claim was it was a cost-saving measure.
That's filled with political talk that
that
could mean so many different things.
It's
that was the official statement, cost-saving measure.
And the reason why it's a cost saving is because if you're no longer gaining revenues off of it, you get, I think there's like a tax benefit of some sort, or you're not continually taxed on it or something like that. I can't remember the exact reasoning behind it, but
that seems weird.
Basically, it costs money to place this, to keep it up on their servers. And if they don't, if they take it off of their services, they take it off of active streaming, then they
I am neither a tax lawyer nor an accountant, so I cannot.
I don't know.
Either
that
way.
Sounds really weird, but
yeah,
whatever.
I didn't see any of it. Jeff, you said you saw an episode.
I saw a little bit of it.
What did you think about?
Well, there's a reason why I only watched an episode or two. Like, I was kind of excited. I'm like, hey, there's a whole world that was built here.
There is always that element of curiosity, but this also came out around the same time as Rings of Power. So it was a time of, shall we say...
like the Lord of the Rings thing that they did.
Yeah, it was around time of, shall we say... fantasy streaming series that weren't always terribly faithful to the source material, to phrase it politely.
I don't know.
Well, and I would say my opinion is that the tone was very different in the new Disney episodes that were coming out of Willow. The tone was different. Willow was a little bit dark. It's a little bit dark. This one was not as dark, but at the same time, I can definitely see why a lot of people didn't like it, because there were things in it that could really go contradictory to the original storyline quite a bit. And those things did upset me, which is why I just stopped watching it. It didn't, there were things in it that just contradict the original characters quite a bit. Yeah.
So yeah, fantasy streaming series that weren't terribly faithful to the original.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or it gets the source material in the case of Rings of Power, but I guess we'll talk about that if we ever do anything with the Lord of the Rings.
So, all right, let me try to close this can of worms and go back to the original source material.
That was me closing the cans of worms, yes.
Yes. And then I'm just going to talk about the movie itself, which was a good movie. I kind of like it. I would definitely put this into a solid watch if you don't already own it. I own it. And in fact, actually, no. I'm going to put this barely on the you probably should go out and buy a copy of this, because it is a good movie.
Yeah, it's entertaining. It's got funny parts. It has a good structured story. This is like the kind of thing, if I was a film teacher, which I will never be, but if I was, as cheesy as it might be, I might actually use this as an example of how you make a basically good movie, because it has all the components in it that you would need, which is, I mean, some people are going to watch it and they won't laugh. They won't be as impressed by it, but I think it has all the right things in the right place to make a basically good movie that people will like watching. All of that. Anyway, go ahead, BJ. We need to hear from you.
So in our great amorphous rating system, is your rating it's a basically good movie?
our rating system that makes no sense to us or anyone else, I would say, yeah, it's a good one. Acquire a copy and place it in a shrine and use it. I don't know, light a few candles around it. It's a good movie.
I think this is like the second week in a row someone's done the entire buy a copy of this and frame it, even though I guess it makes more sense in this movie than it did in like War of the Worlds. But that's neither here nor there. I guess I'll say I liked it a little less than you guys. I was
thinking that would happen.
I do have nostalgia for this movie. This is one of the first movies I have memory going out and seeing in the theater. I might even been a bit too young for this movie because there's some pretty funky parts for younger children. I remember like the brownies being much more amusing. I find them a little more annoying than anything as an adult, but yeah, by and large,
yeah,
it's a good movie. I don't know if I'll say, go out and buy a copy. I'll put solidly in the watch.
Okay. Yeah, watching this as an adult's a little different, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And plus,
right,
there's it seems to be the case in a lot of 80s
movies. Yep.
A lot of 80s movies, I should say. The quote unquote romance isn't great.
I mean, half of the romance has to deal with a person being drugged, but we'll get into that in the spoilers section.
Yeah.
So
okay, so spoilers are in, right? Let's talk about this.
Speaking of spoiler section, so how about that spoiler section? So what did we... So
okay, I'll just come out with the thing that made me stop watching the new series of Willow that came out is that I was fine with it. It really wasn't as good as the original. Of course it wasn't, but I was watching it anyway, just out of curiosity. None of the characters were really all that interesting. They were just kind of like thrown on the screen characters. Didn't really have much depth to them. It was young people being unhappy about their situation, which I get it. It's kind of a Luke Skywalker type
that's kind
vibe.
Of
it's like
a tale as old as time there.
Yeah, and for young audiences, that is gold right there. Young people who don't quite fit into the world or they don't like the expectations put on them. It's very classic storytelling for young people, and I get that. The characters still seemed kind of bland and thrown together. But when they finally introduced Willow and they finally got him on screen, the movie started getting better. And then they throw out this line where it's like, but Willow, you are not a good sorcerer. And then there was this terrible music. It's like, oh no, Willow's actually bad sorcerer. This is the twist we're throwing in. Oh no, it turns out that he was a terrible sorcerer after all. That entire movie and escapade happened. And I just thought, what? Like, the original... obviously he was learning the ways of being a sorcerer, but the fact that he turned out to be a bad sorcerer in the end, I just didn't get it. Like, I don't get it. I don't get all of these Disney plot lines where everybody turns out garbage in their later life. Like, they're sad, depressed, everything's a downer. I mean, I thought Disney was the happily ever after storytelling machine, and now it's like, yeah, but when you actually get to the happily ever after portion of their life, they're not actually happy. And I don't know, it's something weird. I think they're just trying to be different, and they come up with these weird things. So I switched it off. The moment I heard that, I'm like, I can't do this. It's time to just move on. And that's the story.
Okay. So
that was it. It was just Willow being a bad sorcerer. That was one of the plot points they had. And I shut off right there.
All right. So I never watched it, which in this particular case, I think is worse in a way, because I didn't even have the energy to go and watch this particular series. So I guess that's a even worse than some in the company's particular view.
Yeah. I was gonna say worse in that you issue to watch it, or worse for like
Worse
your
for-
concept of
Worse for Disney in that I didn't even want to watch this. So, but anyways, so let's go back to the good one, the actual Willow. And I'm going to talk about a thing, a concept, Jeff, I'm going to talk about a concept, a difference between the classic and between the modern. And I'm going to ask you if the new stuff or the old stuff, because I observed this in the movie Willow a lot, in that there's...
Okay, you're going to have to repeat your question because it's garbled.
I'm getting to the question.
So just start again. What's your question?
I'm getting to the question.
Go ahead.
So there's two types of storytelling, and they revolve around two different concepts. The first concept is the because storytelling, right? Something happens because something happened before, right? And this is generally considered a good storytelling element because, it's something happens because something else happens, and narratively that fits, right? In a person's mind, something fits in their mind where they see something happening and then they see something else happening because the first thing happened, right?
Right.
Even the weakest elements of what we considered the weakest elements of this movie, that love plotline, right? Mad Mardigan, our kind of quasi side hero, our sidekick to Willow, is he doesn't fall in love with the Lady Sorsha until he's hit with a potion or the pixie dust, right? The dust of the broken heart that the pixies have, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't fall in love with her
brownies
until the brownies hit him with that magic dust. And then he falls in love with her. Now, they knew that this dust existed from prior. They established that it existed. He hates Sorsha up until that point because she's this haughty general of the enemy, right? But then he gets hit with the dust and then he falls in love with her. This is the because element, right? I don't know, in more modern storytelling, I've heard the term "and then," right? An "and then" storytelling concept where something happens and then another thing happens and then another thing happens. And these things don't really happen. I mean, they might be awesome, but they don't really happen because... it's not something happened because another thing happened, right? Or something happens and then because that thing happened, another thing happens. It's more like something happens and then another thing happens. So you could have all the awesome things in the world happening and then another awesome thing happening, but it just kind of feels hollow, right? Versus you could have like the lamest things happening in the world, but everything happening because something else happened, and it fits in your mind. You understand it. You kind of are able to empathize with this weird thing.
Things are connected.
Yeah, things are connected, right? So in this movie, all right. So Willow, let me go with another plot thread, right? So Willow, is trying to. He has this baby and he's trying to find a proper caregiver for it. And the place that they go to is a crossroads, right? And then the only people...
Very common place to travel, crossroads.
But it's a wartime, so nobody's traveling on the crossroads except for armies, right? And that an army is not a group of people. So... Because of that,
I mean, like an army is a group of people. But
it's not the kind of group. It's not the group of people you'd give a baby to.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
So, but because of that, he is forced to accept the only other person on this crossroads, that being a person who's stuck in like some sort of cage or prison or something like that. So, because he doesn't have anybody else to give in to. He gives the baby to Mad Mardigan, right? This man who's stuck in
because is there.
Because. Now, and then because Mad Mardigan isn't exactly the best caretaker, as soon as he turns his back, brownies come and steal the baby.
Yep.
But because the baby is already imprinted on Willow, the magical creatures of the forest give the baby back to Willow. There's all these because things happening in this movie. It's not an and then. Yeah. It's just there's reasons behind it. And all of this fits narratively. And this is one of those reasons why I like this movie. Yeah. BJ?
So just because you brought up the creatures of the forest or whatever, did they ever establish what the heck Cylindra is? Or is she just some mystical spirit of the forest or whatever?
Queen of the fairies, I think. Is that who she is? I'm guessing. I'm guessing. So there's Roselle. Was that her name? The sorceress.
Yeah, she's
I'm guessing
Roselle is the character they go and they find on the island.
Yeah. So
Cylindria is the woman in the forest who is the spirit of the forest.
Yeah, I will admit I'm not going to be super hot on details here because I watched this movie about a week ago while I was doing something else, and I was going to rewatch it last night, but then I discovered Godzilla -1 was on Netflix, so I watched that instead.
I mean, good reason right there. But anyways, but I imagine that this Cylindra is kind of like Roselle, only moved to a higher plane or something. I don't know. Maybe she's.
Okay. No, I don't think that
she's something greater.
So there isn't actually a lot of lore established in this movie. This is more of a popcorn movie where they're just trying to get the audience engaged in a scene. Okay, so they don't give you a lot of details. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so to answer my question, I didn't miss anything. They just don't really establish what the heck she is.
No.
I don't think they fully established it, but okay. To defend it, I don't think they really needed to because the experience of the scene really is mostly through Willow's eyes. And Willow sees Cylindria as a very kind, benevolent, and just a force of good. He's able to discern something about her. And so he ends up trusting her, and she gives him this... She basically gives him the background of the battle between good and evil and how this child is central to that. And that this child, he might be a small person in the world, but really he is now in the right time and place.
Wait, do you mean Willow is a small person in the world, not the baby?
Yeah, Willow is maybe a small person in the world, but
I mean, at this point, they're both small people in the world. But
there's a lot of small people in this movie. Yeah, so I don't think they needed to do a huge establishment, and a lot of other entertainment stuff they might do a lot more depth. We've reviewed things that have so much depth created about it, like Dune has depth, and a lot of other things. But this movie, what makes it unique is that it just gives you enough to make the scenes powerful enough. And anything else is just left alone. And Star Wars is kind of like that too. We give you just enough to get you curious about what's happening, but in the end, you don't get a lot of background. You just get enough to get you interested in the scene.
I laugh about this because I've heard you go very in-depth in Star Wars, Jeff.
Yeah, well, Star Wars has grown in depth over time, and it's kind of funny. It's almost like the audience has done it for Star Wars, because Lucas came up with 3 movies, and then suddenly people wrote books about Star Wars, and then they have all these animated series. It's people energetically threw more content into it, but the movies themselves don't have a lot of backstory. They just have the basic pieces they've put in place.
I know you're not terribly fond of prequels, Jeff, but Lucas did do 6 movies.
That's true. That's true. He did also do the prequels. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you for correcting that. Yeah.
So,
So I guess in this case, it is safe to bring up Lucas because he was like a writer, producer.
he was involved.
Yeah, writer, producer
in this particular movie. So
yeah,
and that's why Disney owns this one currently because they
that
acquired
makes
it
sense because
through.
they bought LucasArts.
Yeah, they bought LucasArts, which includes this one and Indiana
Films,
Jones,
whatever it is.
So in this one, there's kind of a roguish hero. I mentioned him before, Mad Mardigan, right?
This movie has some extremely wild names.
Does it?
And
what do you mean, BJ?
You got Mad Mardigan, and like that's like his name. Like he's not like Mad Space Mardigan. No, his name is Mad Mardigan.
Mm-hmm.
There is Queen Bavmorda.
Yeah.
And like Rizal has like some sort of title. She's like Finn Rizal. It's like there's not a name in this movie that's like less than like 3 syllables.
Yeah. Some call me Tim. That's from Monty Python. Some call me Tim. You're a great sorcerer.
So
anyway,
but I mean, in this movie, we also have like the classic hero, right? But he's kind of like this just tiny side character. What's his name? Eric? Yeah, Eric, who's
that's a simple
basically name. He's kind of the closest thing that Mad Mardigan has to a friend. Though he's more he's more than willing to leave Mad Mardigan in the little stews or whatever that thing is called.
He's more like a coworker than a friend.
Gimlet?
Some sort of hanging cage. But he's more than willing to leave him there
in a crow's cage.
Yeah.
They call it a crow's
cage. But Mad Mardigan's like resentful of it later. But then Eric says, "I saved your life because we walked into a trap, and a good chunk of Eric's forces died in the battle that they were planning to do, which is rough. But still, it's like it's one of those interesting. So we got this Mad Mardigan, and he's not a paladin. He's good with the sword, as Willow says later. You are great, right? But
what do you mean by paladin? Is there a character?
He's not lawful good.
Like there's like this lawful good Eric, who's his friend, like the guy in golden armor who wanders around, and he inspires everybody to become this like heroic army to go fight the evil, right? And then he loses.
Well, we might have just caught Mad Mardigan at a bad day. It's possible.
Jeff, but at the same time, what's the second time we see Mad Mardigan first in a crow's cage, and then the second time we see him, what is he doing? Not chasing down the baby. He's instead doing something else
in a tavern.
Yeah. With someone else's wife.
Yeah.
Trying to dress up in a woman's clothing so that he can hide himself. Right? I think this is more of what Mad Mardigan usually does until he's inspired to do great things by Willow. Oh, and also the baby and various and assorted others, right?
Now, you're probably right. He is a very much like a Han Solo type character, where he's somebody who thinks for himself, who does what he wants to do. He's a rogue, as BJ might have mentioned. And then,
I think that was scary, but whatever.
Or whatever. But in the character arc, he slowly starts to gravitate towards something in his life that brings him towards a good cause. And that's what the baby does. The baby somehow stirs something in him. And so he goes down a different path. And there's a character arc. And plus, the love angle, you guys have different feelings about it. It sounds like that was one of the lesser parts of the storyline that you liked, but I think it's actually pretty well put together. Because even though the love potion sparked it, it's still something that develops over time in the storyline. And so that probably helped Mad Mardigan too.
I mean,
by over time, you mean like 3 encounters?
Yeah, 3 encounters. Well, I mean, how many encounters can you have in basically a 2-hour movie?
I mean,
But yeah,
I do appreciate Willow's line in that. It's like, what was happening? And he's like, you're spouting poetry. It's just like the best. Like, you're spouting poetry.
I love you, Sorsha. I worship you, Sorsha. You almost got us killed. The lines are so well delivered.
Yeah, Warwick Davis was a complete gem in this one. So
yeah,
yeah, so we get Warwick Davis who can do magic, but he's very unsure of himself. We've got a roguish hero who's kind of interested in himself, but willing enough to be a semi-decent human being, and also really, really good with the sword as soon as he gets one.
Yeah, and they actually made a unique fighting style just for one character to make him stand out as a character. Because it's one thing to just have somebody be really good with the sword, but they wanted a reason why he was good with the sword, because he has sword skills and sword methods that he and sword disciplines that he's learned that other warriors don't have. It's almost like he somehow was able to gain a greater knowledge, maybe better training somewhere, but his fighting style is different, which also helps him stand out. So he can go through 4 or 5 guys, and he's using different moves.
Is that something that's established, or did you just make, or is that the movie according to Jeff?
I want to say yes. No, you can see it on screen if you want to doubt it, but I'm pretty sure I watched a documentary long ago about this, that they wanted to choreograph something very special for him, so they would, so that his character would also have movements that were just attributed to him. And there's another character we can't forget, which is, what was his name? The big skull guy.
Kale?
Yeah, General Kale. That's a sinister name, named after a vegetable, especially a bitter vegetable.
Vegetable that everyone eats, but nobody likes. Like, bro.
I don't eat it. I've never eaten kale, and I don't really ever plan to, so this is one of those. Yeah. I'll get my veggies other ways.
What would you do with a few extra years of life at the end?
Oh, I eat plenty of veggies, Jeff, just not kale.
Yeah, but General Kale, he's a cool guy. He's got that big skull mask, so reminds me of like Skeletor a little bit. But I honestly think he's a little cooler than that.
The skull doesn't really.
Skeletor isn't terribly cool.
The skull doesn't really provide a lot of protection, right? It just kind of breaks as soon as someone taps it.
It would not be ideal armor at all.
It's better than no armor. It does guard his face at least once.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, but you gotta admit, he probably is wearing that for one simple reason. It's to make himself look scarier. It's theater. And it might work. If you're a general, you want something on you that makes you stand out, that makes people look at you and respect you and know that you're different. And so I know a lot of generals used to wear like big flags, or they'd have certain hats that make them stand out. So a big skull helmet might serve that purpose.
So fun fact, I say as I'm sitting here on the IMDb page. So the gentleman that plays General Cal, Pat Roach, is probably most famous for being the large gentleman who gets killed by an airplane propeller in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh,
Indiana Jones. I didn't know that. That's a good fight scene too.
Yeah, isn't that like classic, like boxing until the plane propeller? It's been a while since I've seen.
It's been a while since I've watched Raiders.
Yeah, once in a while in Indiana Jones, they want Indy to fight somebody who's way stronger than him. It's kind of a it's kind of a recurring theme they often use.
Actually, now I'm looking at his page, he is apparently in all the Indiana Jones movies.
Huh.
He is the chief guard, or he is credited as the chief guard in Temple of Doom and as a member of the Gestapo in Last Crusade. We should do Indiana Jones sometimes. I haven't seen those movies in forever.
They're good ones. We'll do a whole Lucasfilm thing for a while. Anyways.
You know, the 3 Indiana Jones movies.
Just those.
Yes, the 3 ones that exist.
Just the 3.
Just the 3, because those are the only ones that exist, BJ, and no others.
Yes. What else would I be talking about? Just the 3 Indiana Jones movies.
Yeah, I don't know what you would be saying other than those 3 Indiana Jones movies, because no other ones ever got made.
Either, yeah.
None whatsoever.
No. No, sir.
So we've got so even the lady in this one, Sorsha, right? That's her name, who's the daughter of Bavmorda.
Yes.
They don't ever really talk about who the father is.
He's probably dead.
Probably dead. You're right.
It's like Bavmorda doesn't seem like the kind of person that would share the throne, if anyone.
Yeah, probably not. But so we've got Sorsha, and that's the question is I guess apart from legacy, but Sorsha doesn't really seem to want to do what her mother is. She's like a warrior, which
so she's not into magic, right? And we don't know what it takes to become a sorceress, but they don't really talk about that. But yeah, she's just one of her mother's minions, basically.
She seems rather accomplished. I mean, she's
fairly high ranking. She is trusted by her mother. There was a scene pretty early on where one of Bavmorda's counselors I foresee her betraying us, and Bavmorda's I trust her more than I trust you.
Which
and she wants to please her mother. She actually, I get the sense of that at least.
Yeah.
That her character does want her mother to be proud of her, and she wants to please her mother, but she's conflicted because as she goes through the movie, especially the Dust of Broken Heart might be the point where she starts to change. But feeling emotions for Madmartigan sends her into kind of a turmoil of what she views as both of what she thinks is either good or bad. It kind of sets her off. She was very committed to being a bad person and following her mother and building this giant kingdom just for her mother's wealth and power. But she shifts.
I think this is one of those because moments, right? She's devoted to her mother because that is her mother. But she's willing to turn against her mother because she's never felt someone be emotionally, drawn to her in any way, shape, or form amongst all of her mother's minions, right? And then when she finally feels that from Madmartigan, even after the dust has worn off, they are exchanging looks between each other that show that there's genuine emotion there, right? And she can tell it as well, and then she runs off, but after a while she realizes that, she's on the wrong side because the one side just is out looking for themselves, and the other side has people that are willing to care for each other when there's no real reason to do so, right? There's no benefit. Madmartigan cares about Willow and what's the baby's name again?
Allura Diamond.
Laura.
Yeah.
He cares about those two, and then because he cares about those two, she recognizes that, and she also recognizes about him caring about her, and that because of that, she's willing to go against her mother. She's not willing to kill her mother, but she's willing to say, enough is enough, mother. You need to stop.
Yeah, and it's almost like when she finally confronts her mother, she doesn't quite have the words to say to her. She doesn't quite know what to say, but she's definitely upset, and she's now against her, but she doesn't know how to articulate that, like how she knows that what her mother's doing is wrong, and now she's going against that. And I think I didn't get a chance to say it earlier, but I think you're definitely right, Gary, with your analysis of the because or and then. You're right. The things in this story are very much put in place so that because, they explain the reasoning and things are connected and go from one point to the next. Things are not just thrown in. They're all very much flow from one thing to the next.
And there's movies that do that and then movies that don't do that. And the movies that don't do that tend to fall by the wayside, right? They tend to fall apart and people can't really connect to the movie, despite all the spectacle that they might appear before them. It all ends up just being hollow and they don't like it. Or it doesn't stay with them. That's more correctly to say.
Yeah, it's a storyline that builds upon itself, and as you go through it, you can see how things that you learn have an effect on the story later. And I think a lot of writers struggle with that. They struggle with connecting everything together in their storyline, and I think they underestimate how much skill it takes to accomplish that. It's something you really have to work on, and a lot of movies don't really fully understand how difficult it is to write like that, so they just kind of throw things together, and in the end, there's no payoff for things. Thinking of Star Wars movie 9. Anyway, BJ, there are things about this movie you don't like. You didn't think it was as funny.
Well, again,
right?
So the brownies are very entertaining when you're younger. Their humor isn't quite as amusing when you're older, I guess, or at least I didn't really think so.
Sure, I can see that. No, I get what you mean. This movie is more for younger people. I mean, older people can enjoy it too, but yeah.
I think I did mention there's some pretty gnarly scenes that kind of haunted me as a child, shall we say. There's the part with the troll being transformed. There's the army being turned into pigs.
There's the entire Eric, the guy I was mentioning earlier, who's basically a paladin wandering around, he gets killed. And then as he's dying, he says, Mardigan, win this war for me. And then Mardigan goes and brutally kills the general, Skull General. What's his name again? Kale. Yeah,
General Kale.
General Kale. He kills this General Kale.
Brussels sprouts.
So it's
it is dark.
It's
and
dark.
You know what? When they made the new episodes, they were not dark like this. They weren't.
Well, it's dark-ish. Like we have definitely watched movies that are way darker than this. Like I would.
That is true.
Like say for example, like I would say like The Changeling is darker than this. Like Alien is darker than this. Underwater is darker than this. So it's dark
there's violent parts in it.
Dark for like a family movie, I guess.
Yeah, dark for a family movie. Like, for instance, I fully was capable of watching this with my son. I don't know if I would have watched any of those other movies with him. I definitely wouldn't have watched Underwater alien with my son, because those are things that I don't think he's ready for at this point in his young life.
Yeah, and I don't know if movies. I don't know if like those and like The Changeling would be like very entertaining for a young child anyway.
On the other hand, he very much appreciated the brownies. You're right, BJ. Those are kind of like the kids' humor.
Yeah,
where they're just kind of goofy little people.
Like I said, I remember them being much funnier when I was younger.
Even now as an adult, I do feel that there are some moments in there, just a few moments where they're amusing. Like the one gets dumped in a entire keg of ale, and he pops out and he says, "Yeah," and then he goes back to go swimming or whatever he's gonna do. Yeah,
the entire tavern has like brownie contaminated beer. It's a health hazard.
Now, I did appreciate...
Yeah, the health inspector will come by and cite them for it.
Yeah, probably.
Brownies in the ale. Check.
Not good.
You're going to say, Gary.
They fall in love with the cat. The Dust of Broken Heart makes the brownie fall in love with the cat. So you know that this Dust of Broken Heart can get characters to do very dangerous things for themselves, which is kind of a setup for later, because Madmartigan then falls in love with the evil girl.
Yeah, the Sorsha and
yeah,
yep.
Anyway, Gary, do you remember what you were going to say before we derailed you?
Nah. I'm kind of
successfully derailed.
Yeah, you completely successfully derailed me. I have no idea what I was going to say.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Good. No, my pain. Okay. Podcast successfully derailed.
I just love that one of the story elements they had was that they're trying to get to Tir Asleen, this great, powerful kingdom that will protect them. They just need to get there. And then they get there, and it turns out to be so different than what they were expecting.
Yeah, I was going to say, why the heck did what's her name, Cylindra, the big mystical fairy spirit or whatever, yeah, just take her to Tir Asleen, she'll be protected there. It's like, oh, wait, Mav Mortar like already nuked this place or whatever.
So 2 points.
Okay.
That is a good point, BJ. But in the end, it was what ended up being the path towards the baby being protected. So it's kind of strange how things worked out anyway. But on the other point, yeah, it could have been that simply that was a really powerful kingdom, but she had destroyed it. Probably not just with her army, but with her magic, because Madmartigan says that these people are crazy.
Well,
this place is cursed.
The place is, Jeff, I don't know if you noticed there were like rocks with people trapped inside. Were
they drawings or people trapped inside?
No, those were people trapped inside of rocks. Straight up like
ice or something.
That was full on. Madmartigan was right. This place was full on cursed, right? The people had all been killed and the trolls had moved in. I don't know how long ago the people had been killed, but it happened.
Trolls move in, however long it takes for a troll infestation to develop.
The wood was kind of rotting, which shows, but then again, if wood's not, kept up, it can go pretty quick.
Yeah, it could have just been an old castle.
Yeah.
And
there were cobwebs everywhere, but then again, cobwebs seem to move in like within 5 seconds.
That could be, yeah. It could have been just abandoned for a few months.
Yeah.
Like one season of heavy rain, and it would have been deteriorating.
Yeah.
But it's good though to give characters unexpected results. That is good. It throws the characters off, and it puts the audience through more turmoil. But it sets up a great place for a fight scene. You've got a castle siege and you've got
Siege.
a heroic stand of
Unless you're talking about, are you talking about the bad guys attacking the castle or good guys attacking the bad guy castle?
Well,
we got
both things happened
but
in this movie, right?
Well, you know,
yeah, you get 2 castle sieges.
One could be kind of defined as a siege, the other one not so much.
Yeah, well, it was one guy. I mean,
yeah, it's and they didn't even. Then again, and then you saw. Now this is something else. I've heard a lot about this when people talk about historical accuracy or realistic accuracy with these sorts of things. We had 2 completely different ways of breaking a siege, right? In the one case, the people just kind of battered down the gates and then broke their way in, and then Mad Mardigan had to face off against them. And one person with solid knowledge of the defenses of the area was able to do way more damage than he would have in any other circumstance, right? Versus the other siege, which was kind of done through duplicitous means, and both of these were things that happened in sieges back in the day, right? Duplicity, I think, might have actually accounted for more sieges than straight up warfare. Castles were a big thing. People loved their fortresses. It's real easy to defend one.
Thinking, I could be wrong. I'm not a historian. I mean, you know, I don't come to Willow for historical accuracy, shall we say? And B, I think most sieges last longer than 5 minutes or overnight. So
yeah, but they get the ideas of some ideas for sieges, which is you break the door down, battering ram, classic way, and then you also there's the other way where you trick people. There's also
they did have a lot of the classic weaponry of sieges in this one, in that there were a lot of catapults or there was one where it was kind of
boiling oil.
There was one where it's like a catapult, but it wasn't, because instead of throwing like a stone or some of the things out of a basket, instead like hit a whole bunch of darts or arrows or something like that out of the thing at the same time. It's one of those blink and you miss it moments in the first siege, right?
I was gonna say I must have blinked a lot because I remember like a catapult maybe.
There were a few of them. Like I said, Mad Mardigan, with just a few minutes of preparation time and a solid knowledge of the layout, was able to do just an outsized amount of damage, right?
And that's part of Mad Mardigan's character. He's kind of like a medieval Rambo in a sense. Like he's up against, he cannot run away. They can't keep running from this army. Their horses are probably tired. This is probably the best chance he has, is to make a stand here. And after he's discouraged from finally coming to this place and not seeing that there's a friendly army to house them and keep them safe, he just decides, well, he comes into that store of weapons and he just decides, okay, this is it. I'm going to just make a stand here.
Yeah, it is a very handy store of weapons. The one preserved location in this entire castle is a storeroom full of weapons and a gleaming, pristine set of, gold-plated armor? Or something along those lines?
You know, armories are a thing. So I'm not gonna...
He basically got lots of loot. He got into the loot room.
It is terribly handy that the one room that is preserved in this entire abandoned castle is in fact the armory. So
yeah,
I guess that's part of the curse, because the people were destroyed a different way, so all of their loot and their weaponry was kept safe.
Yep.
For Mad Mardigan to find it and then to have this huge battle scene, and to make it all the more fun, they throw in a dragon And the way they throw in the dragon, I think, is one of my favorite ways you do things in a story. In other words, you make the characters make mistakes, which then creates more chaos down the line.
The dragon doesn't show up. The dragon shows up as a because, not a and then. He shows up because Willow is inexperienced and he's been practicing a transformation spell, and he accidentally transforms a troll into, I don't know if it's a dragon. It definitely spits fire.
Yeah, a two-headed monster or something.
It doesn't have wings.
We call it a dragon for...
Yeah. It doesn't have wings.
Dragons don't always necessarily have wings, though.
Yeah, you're right. But it does have 2 heads. And then... Yeah.
I did not do enough. I was not warned this episode was coming up, so I did not do the research into what's the difference between like a dragon and a wyvern and a worm or whatever, so...
It definitely isn't a hydra because they managed to get rid of one of the heads and it doesn't grow back 2 more. So there's that. It actually completely kills the monster. So,
I think it's kind of meant to be a dragon, but it's a dragon that's not connected to other mythology per se. It's just a big beast that breathes fire like a dragon.
Yeah.
And calling it a dragon's fine because that's probably what they were going for, something like that. But they didn't have it move around or walk around. It's a stationary creature.
I feel like it was an aquatic...
conversation failed.
I feel like it was an aquatic creature because it started out in the water.
Went into the water.
Yeah, it was in the water, and then...
That's because Willow hit the troll of magic, and then the troll fell into the moat. So I don't think
maybe
it's necessarily aquatic. It just came out of the water because that's dramatic.
That would explain why it doesn't go away from the water though, because a chunk of its body is in the moat, and then it doesn't want to leave that because it feels more comfortable in the water. It just wants to poke its head and 2 arms out.
Or it could also be because that saved the animation budget.
There is that too.
Yeah, that could have been just because, well, if we don't make the creature move, it's a lot easier to do this scene.
We don't have to animate its whole body, just the neck and the heads.
And 2 arms.
Even have arms? I guess
it had kind of like feet things that stabilized it.
It didn't really do anything.
I don't know if you'd call that arms. I think they were kind of flat and stubby, so I'd probably call them feet more than arms.
In fact, we didn't see most of the body either. So it didn't seem like that moat was very deep.
Yes, that's why I'm in this conversation here, because we just talked for 5 minutes about the biology of this dragon, when all we ever see of it is like its heads and legs and maybe part of its upper body. So yes. Let's move on, shall we? Is there anything to move on to, or are we running out of steam?
I think we're running out of steam.
We are.
Yeah.
We are.
Yeah.
Having this episode last 1/3 length the original.
Which is better.
Episode Willow lasted.
I'd call that a
So let's start at the beginning. Scene 1. No.
I'm just gonna reiterate that I think this is a good movie, and I've stated my reasons. So, Jeff, if you've got anything?
No, I think your point is really well done, Gary. So, definitely, the storytelling is great. The action scenes, they've got long chase scenes that are dramatic, and everything is well connected. The characters are well thought of, and they're characters that have depth to them. They're not like, maybe they're, by depth, I mean they have enough background so that you're interested in the character, and the characters are entertaining, and both they do things that that are fun and interesting to watch on the screen. But at the same time, this movie doesn't get so heavy that it loses its popcorn quality to it. So it's both very intricate and very simple at the same time, just so that you get a good story with lots of fun and good characters. And, you know, I almost think, like, I love Star Wars. I think that was, like, cinematic gold. But I think this is another really good example of a classic Lucas film, where he got all the basic stuff in there, and he has a storyline where the character has to the Nelwyn, which I love the Nelwyn. They're so much fun. But that storyline of they have to get the baby through to the end, and they have to protect the child because the child will bring about a utopia later on. It's lots of fun. The whole thing is great. And it reminds me of Lord of the Rings a little bit because they had a ring they had to carry, and now in this one it's a baby, which is different. But yeah, it's well done. Go ahead, BJ.
I'm just over here trying really hard not to laugh because Jeff's mid-monologue started with, yeah, I don't have anything to say.
I'm always lying.
Yeah, well, as we have established, the asking for closing thoughts is, in fact, the invitation for Jeff's closing monologue. Anyway, yeah, it's a good movie. I like it. Maybe a little less than these other guys. Since Jeff brought the Lord of the Rings, it is not Lord of the Rings, I wouldn't say it's quite on that level, but, Lord of the Rings is maybe some of the best movies ever, so that's not really a dig at Willow. Yeah. But yeah, it's good for what it is. It's a relatively brainless action flick in a fantasy setting. So yes. Yeah.
Now, can we go off on the relative medical benefits of giving Blackroot to babies?
I'm BJ. With me is Jeff and Gary, and I don't know what Blackroot is, so I cannot.
Blackroot.
There's
still debate on whether Blackroot is suitable
to give
for
Blackroot to children. What's the dosage? I
mean,
need to see the material data safety sheet.
How much do you need to give to a baby to give it a hairy chest later on in life? And, that sort of thing.
Never mind. We're going to end it here before we go off on Blackroot like we did with dragons. Anyway, so any serious final thoughts or is that it?
That was it.
That was it. Okay. Jeff, do you have another 5-minute monologue in you?
Yeah, but you said the word serious, so I don't have anything that fits under that very tight restriction of being serious. So no.
Oh, okay.
All done. We can let the audience go on with their life.
Go on with their lives.
Enjoy the wonderful movie. It's a good film.
Good enough. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. I'm BJ. With me was Jeff and Gary, and we will see you next time for whatever we want to talk about. Whatever we talk about. Okay, bye.